Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is a wonderful turnout. Thank you all very much for joining this conversation today. I see numbers adding up as we get started. We're going to go ahead and begin this conversation. I just wanted to thank you all very much for joining this dialogue today. My name is Evan Freund. I'm a senior director for sustainable infrastructure and finance and a member of our WWF sustainable infrastructure team. And I'll be moderating today's session, how financial institutions are factoring nature into what gets built. Again, we have a really great turnout. I'm looking forward to a hopefully robust and active conversation and dialogue. And before I introduce our speakers, I just want to give a little bit of background on the evolution of this series and the intent of this work. So this really is the first thematic specific meeting, which constitutes part of a broader series of conversations organized under the recently developed Community of Practice on Nature and Infrastructure, or CoPNI for short. CoPNI is still very much a loosely organized and evolving community of infrastructure and conservation practitioners, frankly, currently supported by the World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. CoPNI was born back in 2024 as a result of the CBD's decision on mainstreaming biodiversity conservation within and across a number of sectors. Those include mining, finance, fisheries and aquaculture, circular economy, forestry, trade, tourism, agriculture, subnational governments and local authorities, and finally, of course, infrastructure. Some of you may be familiar with the CBD's decision and the work around mainstreaming directed by the CBD. For those of you who are not or may be interested in learning more, I think we'll post a link to the CBD's website on mainstreaming. It's actually the CBD's mainstreaming page, which actually also includes links to a few of the previous Community of Practice on Nature and Infrastructure webinars and all of the planned webinars and meetings for those other sectors that I just noted. Additionally, this meeting and previous meetings from the Community of Practice in Nature and Infrastructure will be posted on the Greening Transportation Infrastructure Development Integrated Program, which is a transportation-oriented program funded by the Global Environment Facility, managed by WWF in partnership with the Asian Development Bank and the United Nations Environment Program, and really aims to mainstream biodiversity into transportation infrastructure development. So again, both of those sites are good places to turn to for the recordings, and the CBD site is a great place to learn more about the mainstreaming agenda. So today's topic is one of great interest to me, and clearly by the numbers who have joined today, of interest to a lot of people, infrastructure finance and integrating nature into financing decisions. And this was a topic that was raised by CoPNI members in previous meetings as being of importance and one that folks would like to learn more about and participated in, excuse me. So there really are a number of ways that we could have approached this session today, and a number of particular themes or sub-themes within this broader theme that we could have addressed. So I'm actually hoping that this may be the start of a series of future conversations around infrastructure finance and biodiversity mainstreaming in infrastructure. And really, before I introduce today's speakers, I just want to touch a little bit more on today's format. You'll note that we're not sitting here in a webinar style format, and that was done by design. As the Community of Practice on Nature and Infrastructure has developed and is evolving, really its main goal is to foster dialogue, cooperation, and communication amongst stakeholders and participants. Really, the goal is to bring together practitioners who are working in a very diverse space to address issues, opportunities, challenges that they may find some commonalities in and with, and to really foster relationships between stakeholders. So the floor will be open. Following the presentations, I hope we can have a really robust and open conversation about the topic. We will be monitoring the chat function, so if you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will address them. Alternatively, for those of you who are familiar with Zoom, and I suspect at this point most of you are, just feel free to use the hand raising function and we will make sure that we get to you. So thank you very much in advance for that. Additionally, if you're not speaking, if you could ensure that your microphone is muted just so that we have clarity from all of the speakers and presenters, that would be great. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's panel members. I'd like to start with Beatrice Casutana. She's representing the Global Infrastructure Basel and the Fast Infrastructure label. Beatrice is a PhD resilience engineer with more than 10 years of experience in defining and assessing the resilience of infrastructure systems and natural disasters. She currently supports and leads the development and uptake of the FAST infrastructure label and plays a key technical role in maintaining and updating the label in line with current sustainability standards. Next, Santiago Aparicio will be presenting from Audubon. Santiago is the Senior Director of the America's Flyways Initiative, and that initiative is a strategic alliance between Audubon, BirdLife International, and the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, or CAF. Santiago is an environmental policy expert. He has over 15 years of experience working across governments, the private sector, and with international donors and NGOs, and he specializes in designing and delivering innovative solutions to climate and biodiversity challenges. And finally, Mauricio Velasquez will be presenting. He's a principal executive for biodiversity and strategic ecosystems with the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF. And at CAF, he leads the biodiversity agenda and coordinates the Strategic Ecosystems Initiative, designing solutions that connect nature, people, and financial systems. So I'm really pleased to have the three of them presenting today. I think this will be a really interesting view into infrastructure finance, conservation, and sustainability. And I look forward to hearing their presentations. Again, following the presentations, we'll open the room to questions, dialogue, and communications. So please be prepared for hopefully an interesting set of questions and conversations. And with that, Beatrice, the floor is yours. And thank you all very much again for joining and participating. Over to you.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for being here and for inviting me to this session. Let me share my slides. Give me a moment. Thank you for having me here. So today I'd like to talk about the Fast Infra Label initiative. So to start with, I wanted to identify the problem. So Global Infrastructure Hub estimates that there is an infrastructure investment gap of 18 trillion US dollars needed by 2040. So why is infrastructure important? For different reasons. I am just going to highlight a few because the Sustainable Development Goals are dependent on infrastructure, because we as a society, we need to become adapted and adaptable to climate change, and this is highly dependent on infrastructure, and because only 46% of the necessary infrastructure projects are ready today. So the Fast Infra Label wants to address three main challenges, as you can see here. The first one is the limited availability of sustainable infrastructure project suitable for financing. So all our stakeholders, everywhere we go, we hear that there is no lack of capital, but there is a lack of bankable and good projects. The second one is the need for market-recognized systems to standardize how sustainability is measured and assessed across different projects. And last one, there is a lack of practical knowledge at the project level on how to implement sustainability and best practices. So with the Fast Infra Label, we want to address this by building a sustainability and resilience framework for infrastructure project, which builds on top of existing established standards and best practices. So we call the Fast Infra Label a meta standards because we do not reinvent the wheel. We just assimilate what is already there in the market. The Fast Infra Label is applicable at the asset level for every region at every project stage. So we really want to establish the global or a common language that can be shared across different stakeholders all over the planet. It is adopted by infrastructure financiers to identify projects and investment opportunities. And as part of the Fast Infra label, we also offer capacity buildings, and we kind of accompany projects, especially in the early stage, in the development phase, to achieve high sustainability performance and comply with the Fast Infra label. And lastly, we partner with Bloomberg. They are building the data upload portal, and they store the data for us. And by doing so, they also enable investors to have more visibility on the labeled projects. So a little bit on the history of the label. In 2020, the first idea of the Fast Infra initiative was first conceived. But it was not until 2022 that the Fast Infra Group was created. So the Fast Infra Group is a group of private actors, including commercial bank, asset managers, and financiers. And they wanted the Fast Infra label to be on the market because they wanted a strong signal about the sustainability of a project. They wanted a quick and intuitive way to recognize sustainable investment opportunities. So Global Infrastructure Basel, that I represent here today, was awarded the Fast Infra Label Secretariat, and Bloomberg, the data repository developer. So from 2023, the first framework was developed. It was on Excel. We only had 5 projects on which we prototyped the framework, which de facto is a questionnaire, and I will tell you more about this in a few slides. So from 2023, moving forward, we rapidly grew. So in 2025, the application portal of Bloomberg was launched, and this is when we started to really scale. So we really started to, more and more projects were using the label to self-assess themselves. So as of the first quarter of 2026, we reached 26 billion in US dollars in terms of capex of the project that are assessed under the label. But this number is already outdated because as of today, we have more than 38 billion of projects in terms of capex. And here you can see a little bit the geographically spread of where the projects are. Here, just a few examples of the project that we label. They really span from different sectors. So from renewable to like what we consider high impact sectors, at least in terms of emissions, for example. So we have transport, we have water management, we have a desalination water plant, communication, and also buildings. So the Fast Infra label, as I mentioned before, it was an initiative from the private market. They wanted such a system to be in place. We, as the secretary of the label, we operate the label, but we rely on a strong governance body. So we have the so-called executive advisory committee, which is a group of people from different organizations, which we consult ad hoc. We have working groups, and they help us making recommendation on the evolution of the Fast Infra label. Then the decision power lays with the steering committee, which is a group of 10 people representing different sectors, which we meet 4 times a year, and they help us take key decisions on the Fast Infra label. So they have the decision power about the Fast Infra label. So I thought perhaps within the context of this this meeting, it would be interesting to show some use cases. So how have different stakeholders used the label? So we have a group of stakeholders which use the label as a screening tool. We had, for example, a renewable power plants developer in Japan. They wanted to benchmark themselves against international best practices. This is because they wanted to do better than the existing regulation in Japan, and they wanted to understand how they position against their peers. So they went through the label. They did not pass the label, but they understood why they don't pass the label, and it was a good way for them to benchmark against their peers. Another group of project, they use the label to guide the design of the project itself. So here we have a success story from the Fast Infallible. We have a water desalination plant in Egypt. Because in Egypt, no net of biodiversity are not required by law, the project did not require it. So they were not achieving non-net loss of biodiversity, right? So but following the process of failing the Fast Infallible, the assessment at first, they then introduced the requirement of having at least non-net loss of biodiversity within the project design. So this is how the Fast Infallible can act as a guide to really lead the project design in the early stage of a project life. Then we have some projects that use the label to support communication and get better visibility with investors. This is the case of we have a developer in South Africa. They are installing solar rooftop on top of schools. So they have many small projects, 600 projects in total, but each one of them is quite small. And they want access to finance and visibility with investors. And this is why they have pursued the Fast Infallible, and they are now in the process of getting the verified Fast Infallible. I will tell you about this in a moment. We then have asset manager. They use the label mainly to gather data at the asset level. So sometimes asset manager do not have necessarily the visibility of what happens at the asset level, but the Fast Infallible is a good way to communicate data bottom up. And this is important because, for example, in Europe, asset managers and corporations have to report against SFDR or SDR, against existing regulation where they need this data at the asset level. Then financing and insurance, this is a bit more of a vision for the future. So we do want to demonstrate that projects that are labeled get better financing and insurance terms. We are, in this regards, we are collaborating with, for example, the Climate Bond Initiative to have the Fast Infallible so that projects that are labeled can be eligible, for example, for green bonds. And finally, on the risk management side, we have been talking with insurers, and there is a use case that after that for some projects which are labeled, they may be able to access lower premiums on insurance. And this could be possible after having been labeled for a minimum of 5 years. If insurance sees that for these 5 years, the performance of the project have not been decreased, and the resilience performance of the project has stayed the same, that could be a signal to signal insurance that actually that project is resilient and could have access to insurance at better terms. So I feel a lot of things that I mentioned in the previous slides might become clearer as I explain effectively or practically how the label works. So for a project to be labeled, the process is quite simple. The first step would need to register on the Bloomberg data upload portal. And then once the project is logged in, it has to basically fill in a questionnaire. This questionnaire consists of 3 parts. The first part are the minimum safeguards. And here, projects have to upload some documentation, including, for example, the environmental and social impact assessment, climate risk assessment, so on and so forth. Then the project will have to fulfill the so-called baseline requirements. And this is a set of best practices that are taken from existing standards or frameworks. So we would ask, for example, what are the impacts of biodiversity, what are the emissions, on whether there is a gender and inclusivity action plan in place, so on and so forth. So on top of it, the project needs to showcase at least one positive contribution. So this is very much aligned with existing taxonomies for sustainable finance, where we do not only want project to do good enough. We want them to demonstrate a positive contribution. In the taxonomy, this is called significant contribution to a sustainability goal. So the positive contribution can stem from either the project inherent nature or from something the project does by design. So for the case of a solar power plant, for example, by design, the solar power plant avoids emissions because it displaces, in most countries, it would displace a fossil fuel-based power plant, which would emit more, right? But let's say for the same solar power plant, if it also provides electricity to a community which to vulnerable people, or if it connects an area which was not previously connected to the main power grid, in that case, it could also fulfill this positive contribution towards the social dimension of sustainability. So after this questionnaire is filled in, the project will be automatically be awarded a self-assessed fast infra label. So this is just a self-assessment. And if the project wants to give a stronger signal to the market, it can also go into third-party verification to obtain the verified label. So I mentioned before that we say that the fast infra label is a meta standards because we do not want to reinvent the wheel. We want to take from existing best practices. So here in this chart, you see on the left-hand side, all the different institutions and standard that we consider. So you can see here IFC, there is a lot, we take a lot from IFC performance standards. And you would know that IFC performance standards does not expand so much on the climate-related disclosure. And for that, we use, for example, ISSB IFRS standards. In any way, on the Fast Infra Label website, you can see the interactive plot and how the different sources are used to develop our questionnaire. The questionnaires consist of, we divide the questions into 4 dimensions, which consist of the ESG plus the resilience dimension. And then each one of these dimensions is subdivided into 14 criteria, which consist of biodiversity, climate change mitigation, resilience, stakeholder engagement, and so on and so forth. There are also, something that I would like to mention is that the positive contribution that I spoke about before, we developed the indicator for the positive contribution directly from the Sustainable Development Goals. So in total, 65 Sustainable Development Goals indicators are covered by 49 positive contribution indicators. So again, this plot, the interactive version of this plot is available online. And I want to conclude by, well, I still have a few slides to mention what are the requirements for the biodiversity criterion of the Fast Infra label. So before doing that, I need to introduce a couple of concepts, although my colleagues from WWF and the Nature Conservancy will be much better placed to explain these concepts, but I'll do my best. So
Recording in progress.
in the Fast Infra label, we apply the mitigation hierarchy in the biodiversity criterion, but it can be easily applied to other sustainability dimensions, for example, climate change mitigation. So according to the mitigation hierarchy, the project should first minimize its impact by avoiding, and then minimizing, restoring, and finally offsetting. So offsetting is really a measure of a last resource when everything else is done. And this will become clearer in the next slide, what it means. But by looking at this plot, you can see the difference between non-net loss of biodiversity, which is the point at which project-related impacts on biodiversity are balanced by measure taken by the project, and net gains. But that happens when the project more than compensates for its impact. So let's take the case of a railway. Let's say the railway originally was supposed to go through a wetland, which is an area of, it's a critical area with high biodiversity value. So the first thing that the project should do should try to avoid that area altogether. So for the new project site, let's say the initial design of this railway was supposed to follow this course. And let's say to minimize impact of biodiversity, by design, we choose to change this route, right, and follow instead the red route in order to minimize impacts on biodiversity. I think in this case, it would allow more farmland to be, it will develop more in a farmland habitat rather than in a woodland area. So for the new chosen site, the project can choose to do restoration. So restoration means, let's say the railway needs to cut some vegetation in order to for the project to exist, but the same vegetation is replanted in a bit farther from the project, so but within the same site. And then to offset or to compensate for any residual impact after that, the project can decide to do offsetting, meaning to do taking some conservative measures in a place which is different from the project site. And there are some limitations to offsets. So we follow this four principle. So not everything can be offset. For example, species extinction cannot be offset. There is additionality, meaning that the offset must go beyond what is already protected and planned. There is equivalence, meaning that the offset, the biodiversity value brought by the offset needs to be at least the same or higher than the biodiversity value which is lost because of the project, and permanence, meaning that it needs to be secured in the long term. And this is very important also for the fast infra label, because we do require that projects have a long-term monitoring system in place. This is because biodiversity let's say effects are seen in the long run. Within the fast infra label, we apply different requirements according to the type of habitats that the project is located. Here I took a slide that I repurposed from a training that we gave last week to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I won't go into the details, but just to mention that for projects that are in non-critical habitats, either modified or natural, we require no-net loss of biodiversity. And this is taken directly from the IFC performance standard. Whereas for projects that are in critical habitats, we require net gains of biodiversity. So to summarize, the biodiversity criterion has 16 core indicators, meaning questions that we ask. So first of all, we ask that the project avoid or mitigate impacts on critical habitats and ecological corridors. We ask that the project demonstrate no-net loss of biodiversity or net gains if they are in critical habitats. We ask that the project conducts a biodiversity and ecosystem service risk assessment and that it has a long-term monitoring and adaptive management scheme in place. For deposit contribution, we ask that the project has net gains of biodiversity without the use of offset. And these may be, for example, by increasing the area of natural habitats or decreasing in proportion of degraded habitats, protection of endangered species, and so on and so forth. So I hope that gave you a good idea of what we do at FAST, and happy to hand it over to you, Evan.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. That was great. There are a couple of questions that have appeared in the chat. We're going to save those until the conversation portion, but that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to now turn it over to Mauricio and Santiago to pull up their presentation and share. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Santiago. Thanks for sharing. First of all, thanks, Evan, and the organizers of this space. I would like to introduce you to America's Flyways Initiative. Next slide, please. And basically, we are we're an initiative, an alliance with the BirdLife International, Audubon National Society, and CAF, Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. The picture here is a picture of Panama City, a city in which we have been invested a lot of in infrastructure, in water treatment plants, and the metro transportation system, and many other things. We want to do these things more sustainable. Next. CAF is the Latin American and Caribbean Development Bank. What we want to have is to finance sustainable and inclusive growth across the region. We have 24 member countries right now, and perhaps during this year we are going to increase that number and to become the multilateral or the development bank with the more country members in the region. Last year we approved $18.56 billion. It was the highest amount in our 56 years of history. And that helped to strengthen the CAF role as a green bank in the region. Our new commitment is to allocate $40 billion until 2030. That is a pledge that we made last year in COP30 in Belém do Pará. And we want to increase the amount of investment in clean energy projects, resilient infrastructure, and we want that will be made with the biodiversity positive impacts. We have a mission-driven agenda of strategic ecosystems, resilience, and agriculture, sustainable agriculture. And in that initiative, we want to work in 15 strategic ecosystems, such as the Amazon region, mangrove across the region, Paramos and tropical Andes, Patagonia, and several others. In 2022, we made a pledge and we established a target of to attain 50% of green financing in 2026. But in 2 years before, in 2024, we hit 40% of green financing. Actually, it was 41%. And last year, we hit 46% of green financing. So we established a new goal of 50% of sustainable portfolio by 2030. And again, our focus will be renewable energy. The region needs that. Sustainable mobility, water sanitation, circular economy, and nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. We have a video here that is
Cada año,
subtitled in
millones de
English.
aves recorren nuestro continente, conectando paisajes, culturas y comunidades. Sin embargo, estas rutas milenarias enfrentan serias amenazas: pérdida de hábitats, cacería, contaminación, cambio climático e infraestructura insegura. Proteger los sitios clave donde las aves se alimentan, descansan y se reproducen es esencial para su supervivencia y la nuestra. Así nace America's Flyways Initiative, AFI, liderada por National Audubon Society, BirdLife International y el Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina y el Caribe. Combinamos ciencia aplicada y mecanismos financieros ágiles para invertir estratégicamente en la naturaleza y las comunidades que dependen de ella. AFI propone consolidar un portafolio robusto de proyectos de inversión que integre y amplíe soluciones basadas en la naturaleza e infraestructura amigable y segura para las aves, con el objetivo de proteger y restaurar ecosistemas prioritarios, mitigar el cambio climático y promover un desarrollo sostenible para las personas. Nuestros esfuerzos están alineados con los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, ODS, las metas climáticas que cada país ha definido en el marco del Acuerdo de París, el desafío de Bonn para la restauración de ecosistemas, el nuevo Acuerdo Global para Proteger la Biodiversidad y la Convención sobre Especies Migratorias, CMS. Juntos estamos construyendo un mundo más justo, próspero, saludable y sostenible. Sé como las aves. Abre tus alas y vuela más allá de las fronteras.
Thank you, Santiago, for this video. And
Cada millones
okay, well, so that is SAFI, is our alliance, a word that we want to spread in the whole region, Latin America, the Caribbean, and also, well, we have been having some experiences and exchange of knowledge with the North American institutions. For example, in Vancouver, several technicians of CAF visited a water treatment plant that have bird-friendly measures in their management. And basically, AFI wants to promote that, to promote projects and investment that support bird-friendly, climate resilience, and nature-positive development across key migratory corridors in the Western Hemisphere. Next slide. How we do that? Well, basically, our partners here, Elizabeth Gray, the CEO of Audubon, Martin Harper, CEO of BirdLife International, and many technicians in the region, in the country members of CAF, are helping us to put science in our investments, to help improve our standards in environmental assessments of different infrastructure projects. After they put other efforts in, help us to make stronger the projects, to include also some mitigation actions or actions that help us to have bird-friendly projects, and also projects that have lots of, let's say, 100% green projects, having a different experience, development of infrastructure or sustainable agriculture, things like that. And basically, is that, please, Santiago, you can continue with this.
Thank you, Mauricio. I'm going to follow with
Santiago, I think you're on mute.
oh, there. Do you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share again my screen here. Do you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So as I was mentioning, I'm going to show you some details, additional details of America's Flyway Initiative. So we have an overarching goal of securing 10% of the population of representative migratory birds. We are planning to do this by delivering 30 large-scale priority investment projects. And we expect that these projects will sum between 3 and 5 billion in funding that will require. So this is a goal that we have to 2050. So far, we have been implementing the initiative for 1.5 years, and so far we are working actively in 4 countries. We have 2 projects of infrastructure that I'm going to explain in a bit, and we have 3 projects already, 2 projects formulated of nature-based solutions, and 1 project under formulation. So we divide our focus on 2 big categories of projects that correspond to the 2 big categories of risks that migratory birds have. So one category is nature-based solutions that respond to the risks that we have of degradation and reduction of critical ecosystems that birds need on their migratory routes. So that's one of the categories of projects that we have. And the other category of project that we have is nature-based solutions. It's bird-friendly infrastructure. So in this first category of nature-based solutions, I'm showing here a picture of one of our first projects. It's a project located in Chile, in the Biobío region. It's a project focused on the restoration of a wetland that is critical for controlling the flooding in the second largest populated city in Chile. So we identified this project thanks to the information that the wimbrel and other key migratory species gave us. And this is something that is key from the initiatives that we use, the data that migratory birds gave us to identify which are the key spots where AFI needs to work in. As you may acknowledge, birds are bioindicators. So birds, if the population of birds is okay and it's a healthy population, we would have, it signals that there is a healthy ecosystems. And if we have healthy ecosystems, we have development. So we are using in AFI the data of bird science to guide investments. So this is one of the examples of how we use of this category. It's key to acknowledge that when we are talking about nature-based solutions, initiatives, and projects, we are not talking only about green projects, but we are talking also about hybrid projects. For example, the solution here is focused on how we can promote and develop sustainable recreational parks that can protect and restore the wetland. So we have here a hybrid solution, and that is something that is really key, because we mix the restoration also with sustainable infrastructure. The second category I was mentioning is bird-friendly infrastructure projects. We have one project here in Ecuador that is a 69 kilometers energy transmission line. CAF gave a loan to the government of Ecuador, a loan of around $200 million. And with CAF, we identified that there was an opportunity of improving or enhancing the sustainability of this energy transmission line that was constructed for bringing energy from a hydroelectric to replace diesel plants on the coast. And we identified that in 69 kilometers of the whole route, there was a risk of collisions of migratory birds. So we began all the process with CAP technicians to enhance and improve the impact assessments that they had. And finally, they were really open to really move beyond compliance, and they accepted with the client, that is in this case is the Ministry of Energy, SELEC, and they accept the recommendations to install like some big diverters that would make visible the energy transmission line, and the flocks of birds would have the possibility of deviating from the line. So they are going to reduce the risk that they have of colliding with the line. This is interesting that how we arrived to this project, and it's because it's one of the approaches that we have for identifying projects that have opportunity for having this enhancement, this bird enhancement. If you make help me if you can use this word, is that CAF is, as Mauricio mentioned, CAF is mobilizing and financing around $18 billion per year. So what we have established with CAF, with this alliance, is a system where we are screening constantly the pipeline of projects that they have on infrastructure. And we, through a methodology that we have, we began assessing all the opportunities they have on infrastructure, and we began checking which opportunities are under the flyway and may need an improvement from the birds perspective. And this is really important because a lot of people ask why birds. Yeah, and this is important because birds is one of the most sensible species that we have. And if we tackle birds, we are using birds as an umbrella to also tackle other biodiversity challenges. And this is really, really important. So this is one of example I wanted to mention the screening system that we have that would take us to have multiple projects of infrastructure. This, as I call it, is a demonstrative case. So the first one is the most complex one to really know that it is possible. What's the additional cost of installing a deviator? What it is the cost, and this is important, of having a monitoring system after the infrastructure is built. As Beatriz was mentioning, this is really key in infrastructure. It's not only about deploying a solution, but it's always a key to keep checking if the solution is really working. So this is the first project I want to share. The second project in infrastructure is the project that CAF is already building at Panama. It's a $88 million building that CAF is having on Panama. And it was designed initially only as a LEED certified building. And from AFI, we began finding the opportunity of enhancing the LEED certification, including that it has bird friendly characteristics. So at this moment, at a factory in Europe, they are manufacturing the big glasses that have like special characteristics to reduce the risk of collisions of birds, because birds usually, if the building is located in areas where we have trees or surrounding vegetation, the reflection confuses the birds, and birds hit the windows. So that you have a reference of a recent study that was developed at the US. The estimated that at US they are losing 1 billion birds per year because of the collisions. So if you can make a proxy of that study in Latin American cities that has a lot of trees and vegetation, for sure we are facing a similar risk. So it's key to have the building of this infrastructure having in mind this. Something that was important and was a learning is that if the building has bird friendly characteristics, it gives additional points to the LEED certification. So this is something key to have in mind. And finally, just to share here, we develop 4 guides, the 4 playbooks that guide the formulation of bird-friendly projects in water, in restoration of ecosystems, in coastal resilience, and in infrastructure. So this is key. You have here the QR. If you want to have access to them, you can also download them from our website. And we found that these kind of instruments are critical because still we need still to build the capacities so that people that is currently used to formulate projects as we have been doing it on the last decades, they need to begin like building the capacities to really know how to be more accurate in how to integrate the existing science to have better investments that would have better returns to the society. So thank you. I would leave it for now here and be open to the questions.
Thank you so much, Santiago. Thank you, Mauricio and Santiago, for that great presentation, a very interesting initiative and some great demonstration projects. We are going to transition to questions and a conversation now. So before we do, and there are a couple of questions in the chat, I just want to remind everybody online that this presentation is being recorded. It will be available on the Community Practice in Nature and Infrastructure website, the link for which is posted at the top of the chat. So feel free afterward to make your way to the site and download the presentation. You'll also obviously therefore be able to access the QR codes for the guides that Santiago referenced. So we have a couple of questions, and again, feel free to use your raising hand function or just jump in if other questions strike you. A couple of us are monitoring the chat and the room. So the first two questions actually are to you, Beatrice. You've probably seen them. I'm going to build on the first one actually, because it's really about market adaptation and recognition. And the question really was focused on recognition by the MDBs like the IFC and the World Bank, who, as you noted, are actually contributors to, and in the case of the IFC, the performance standards really serve as the floor, right, for the development of the label. But if you could address this question about recognition by the MDBs of the label and just more broadly market uptake, how is it being used, what the feedback has been so far, and if you would take it a step further and be willing to address some of the challenges or obstacles that collectively FAST has seen in self-verification or even just putting projects against the label, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we are involved with different MDBs. So we have a project by EBRD, for example. The Inter-American Development Bank uses FAST to facilitate their due diligence process in their PPP unit, for example. We are in talks with the Asian Development Bank to kind of seek a mutual recognition, because the principle that we use in FAST are the same principle that MDBs uses in their due diligence. The recently published the ADB ESG framework is very much aligned with the FAST Infra label. So I'm not sure what is meant here by recognition, but definitely there is a conversation ongoing. They are aware of FAST, and we are working towards the same end. Then I don't think FAST can replace the heavy due diligence than the MDB do, but it can help in the process. If I get the question right. Yeah.
I think that's right, Beatrice. And so really, then the next phase of this question is broader market adoption, and whether you're seeing FAST as a way to facilitate projects coming to market that meet these criteria. So they're high integrity projects, as you've noted, across different sectors, and filling that pipeline. And if not, maybe what are the obstacles associated with that?
Yeah. So I think the main, so we see that the FAST Infra label is more used. So I'm based in Singapore. The rest of my team is based in Europe, and I see the difference. So in Europe, where there are legislation in place that ask corporates or organizations to report against ESG, then the FAST Infra label is very much used. So they welcome an initiative like the FAST Infra label to gather data, to showcase their stability performance, so on and so forth. Here in Asia, where regulation is a bit more fragmented, people don't see the need as much. And I think the main barrier that we see is that really investors have to request it. So it's not that a few projects come to us saying, I would like to benchmark myself, I would like to communicate about my sustainability performance. And that's great. But I think in order to reach scale, we really need major investors to adopt the label. And we haven't seen that as much as we would like to.
Thank you so much. And if I could, just one more with respect to the various criteria, but do you feel as though, or have there been comments or questions about the biodiversity criteria and the application of those criteria? Because they're so specific to a particular project, it's sometimes hard to roll biodiversity criteria up to a level that's applicable across sectors and across geographies. And if so, do you anticipate any modifications to those or changes in the way that those may be applied going forward?
Yeah, so yeah, super relevant question. Thank you. So the biodiversity criterion is in fact the criterion on which project failed the most because it's very poorly understood. Biodiversity offsets, I mean, for example, for some markets here in Asia, they're difficult to procure. There is a lack of consultants and advisors who could do a biodiversity assessment. So it's very problematic. And it's quite heavy actually also in terms of requirements. Moving forward, what we were thinking is that we should perhaps differentiate farther. So now we have different requirements for project in critical and non-critical habitats, but maybe moving forwards we should further distinguish, let's say, a greenfield project, a railway that crosses critical habitats with a hospital in an urban modified habitat. So we should further go into that direction.
Thank you. Great. Yeah, that seems to make a whole lot of sense. One more question regarding the label, and this was asked by Martijn. I don't know if you want to expand upon this question, Martijn, if you're still with us, but there was a question about cost. Is there an actual cost for applying the label, getting verification, whether it's self-verification or a formal verification?
Yeah. So the self-assessed process is totally free. But however, if you want to go into verification, then there is the cost of verification, which is not, we don't manage that. So it's agreed between the verified and the project independently of us. But we do offer some grants to cover this cost. So there are some criteria to become eligible for that. But if please, like, feel free, like if you're interested, I'd like to explain more. And yeah, offline or in a bilateral meeting. Yeah.
Super, thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure that all of the presenters' contact information is also available with the presentation, so you can reach out directly. I'm going to switch just quickly to a hand in the room. Tremi Gregory, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for these presentations. It was really terrific. I knew quite a bit about your initiatives before, but I learned even more today, so that was really appreciated. I guess I'll just ask, being a primatologist, mammologist, a biased question about, it seems like with the CAF Audubon BirdLife Initiative, you have the AFI initiative, you have an amazing pipeline method that you use to look at all the projects that CAF has. And I know you've talked about birds as important indicators. Of course, I 100% agree. But you could also say there's some impacts that aren't entirely captured by birds, for example, terrestrial fragmentation and things like that for animals that are walking along on the ground. Do you see space to bring in other taxa in your pipeline, in your evaluations of impacts? And if so, how would you go about doing that?
I will take that. Thank you, Tremaine. Well, basically, AFI and the methodology that we apply with AFI projects doesn't exclude us to work with other taxa. Basically, CAF have a different team that work with the environmental and social safeguards and climate safeguards also. So in our safeguards, we take care of everything, biodiversity as a whole, natural ecosystem, etc. But we use AFI as a methodology in order to go further and to go beyond compliance, and also in order to help CAF to attain or to achieve these goals, green finance goals that I mentioned before. And I think that for many people, birds are a very useful way to make synergies to connect. They understand the presence of birds. They are an easy biodiversity indicator. But of course, we have been working, let's say I used to work during my first 10 years in CAF in the safeguard division. And we incorporate a lot of measures in several infrastructure projects. For example, we stop also some projects in which we have Andean bird populations or things like that. So we cover the biodiversity as a whole. We use the taxa and that are presented in the regions in which we work, and we take care of. We try to take care of everything, ecosystems as a whole. Some species can be used as indicators, but uh, going, let's say, we are also trying to do things with other tax. Let's say there has been an initiative of Jaguar. So we are going to partner with the environmental ministries of different countries in order to help to fund several conservation initiatives, perhaps with technical operations, or perhaps in some others with other type of operations, financial operations.
Great, thank you. That's terrific.
Thanks for the question, Tremi. I am going to I see one at the bottom of the chat, or it was at the bottom of the chat. Suzanne, if I could call on you, and feel free to ask it if you're still available. If not, I can read the question. And by the way, if you have a question, it would be super helpful if you could tell us who you are and where you're from. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks to the presenters for wonderful, very informative presentations. I really enjoyed it. As Evan kind of introduced the community of practice on nature and infrastructure at the top of the call, and one of the things that jumped out through consultations for forming this community was sort of consistently an emphasis on the importance of engaging investors and the financial sector in advancing this space. And so I'm just curious if that resonates for you as sort of a linchpin, or if that surprises you, and also sort of how you see the role of the financial sector and financial institutions in this space relative to governments. So a question I wanted to ask was if you had one thing you could wish for from governments, to help catalyze progress, what would it be?
Thanks, Suzanne, for the question. I'm assuming that's a question for all of our presenters.
Okay, the first thing that comes up off the top of my head is perhaps more stringent and consistent regulations. Yeah.
I would say that one thing, obviously it's not one thing that would create a change, but one thing for me would be having more openness to understand economic value, not only thinking about financial value, but having more openness to understand the value that we have with the ecosystem services. That would be my one wish.
My wish will be alignment, because governments have several sectoral authorities, and sometimes they have a opposite objective, and they are not opposites at the end, but they need to align in order to go further in a sustainable path.
Great, thank you. Interesting answers. And actually, that is a nice dovetail or segue into a question that was raised by Daniel Hornet, which I'm going to read, but Daniel, feel free to jump in and elaborate on this. It's presenting the value of the America's Flyway Initiative to different ministries. Do you approach different ministries with different value propositions? For example, does it resonate more in a certain way with Ministry of Public Works than it might with the Ministry of Finance or with the Ministry of Environment? So how do you differentiate the values and the benefits between audiences as you look to scaling up or introducing or even just adaptation within participating countries?
Okay, maybe let me jump here. Great question. What brings me to highlight the value of strategic communication, because the project is one, being coherent, but we need to use strategic communication to really talk to the key audiences with the key language and tokens that they need. So let me use briefly one example. That is a project in Chile that we began having the support of the Ministry of Environment, because it was a project for restoring a wetland. But for them, maybe it's key talking about the windbrill, the water quality. But then if we began talking with the Ministry of Finance, we then were required to make an analysis to show the returns of investment. So we were not talking here only of plants pollinated, of number of birds, but we were talking about millions of dollars and the returns of investment that come from restoring a wetland because of the flood prevention, because of the carbon sequestration, because of the added value of the land, because of agritourism. So yes, the answer is that we need to be really wise in using the communications technique to show the value of the project.
By any chance, Santiago, did you publish that case study? Because that's the $1 million question, so to speak. Demonstrating economic value is, as Beatrice noted too, I think the lack of ability to show bankability in addition to less or harder to quantify benefits, I should say, and having these case studies available and shareable, I think, to other ministries, financiers, whether they be from MDBs like CAF or the private sector, I think is an obstacle in adoption and uptake and filling that pipeline.
Yes, we published it. This was delivered in alliance with ISSD. So I have just put in the link in the chat box the link to the study.
Brilliant.
So it's wonderful having it, but it's key knowing that it's not enough. We need to always have that technical rigorosity with the communication technique, but we also need to have the political will. And that's also something from the political economic science that we need to have. If you don't have those two wings, we will not have any bird flying.
Thanks so much. I'm going back to the screen here. Tremi, I see you have another question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to jump on what you're discussing. For the CoPNI, the Community of Practice on Nature and Infrastructure, we have conducted several conversations with the community on what they would like from this community of practice. And one thing that was repeated over and over again was cost benefit analyses. And that came from that we've heard that from the IDB, we've heard it from governments, we've heard it from researchers. So I think it's really powerful to have documents like this one. And I just encourage you to produce more and more. I hope we'll be able to do so too, because that's what really makes the case. People want to see the savings over time. which of course we all know is there. So just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks. Yeah, great point, Tremi. Beatrice, to you.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. I was just wondering, like, when for a question for Santiago or Mauricio or whoever has a question, when you develop this bird-friendly projects or nature-based solution that have a precise aim to improve the population of birds and protect them, is there the possibility, how do you safeguard against maladaptation? And maladaptation is something like you are achieving, you're trying to achieve a goal of sustainability, but there might be some side effects. Sorry, perhaps this is a difficult question, but I just take inspiration from the Climate Bond Initiative has developed the resilience taxonomy, and they have something called the non-significant harm and the positive contribution or substantial contribution to the goal. But then they also have maladaptation, because sometimes it might happen that in the case of resilience, it's quite obvious. Like you build a flood defense, a gray flood defense, which is great because it enables the project to be resilient, but in fact, it has some maladaptation on other aspects. I wonder if that's possible. Maybe it's not relevant in the case of bird-friendly infrastructure.
Well, I would say that as Santiago presented in the map, we have a few cases of AFI. We want to increase our portfolio in the region, and it's a challenge because some of the projects that we already have, like in the preliminary list, have to be very well reviewed by the technical teams of CAF, also not for the safeguards team, but for the green business team, and also for technicians from Audubon. And we are going to perhaps to uh, clean the list, clean the potential portfolio, and we need to do it quickly but very well. Maladaptation is something that, well, we try to avoid with our projects. And I'm not sure if, well, in the cases, in the examples of AFI projects that we have already, we have a problem with that because there has been like a basic problems. We are projects, sorry. We have that is something that let's say Santiago presented four playbooks, four sectors that are at the beginning somehow, I won't say easier to go with at the beginning in trying to improve AFI's projects. But I would say in the playbooks we have a list of actions and activities and issues that we need to double check. And perhaps if we go to other projects, we are going to have more probabilities to face a challenge as you mentioned. But at the same time, I would say CAF is also an implementing agency of a Green Climate Fund and also a adaptation fund. So we have specialized teams that help us to develop those projects. And this climate team is also being involved in the evaluation or assessment of new AFI projects. So I will take in consideration your recommendation, and that is something that we will oversee in the building of this AFI portfolio in the region. Thank you, Beatriz.
Thank you. I don't know, maybe it's not material for the case of biodiversity, but yeah, good to.
No, it's interesting. Yep.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mauricio. Great question, Beatrice, and interesting set of
Maybe
challenges. Yeah, Santiago, please go ahead.
maybe to add, Beatrice, that besides having a rigorous safeguard system that evaluates a project on CAF's process, with the also having in the design the people from Audubon and BirdLife, something that is key is also that we are always including a monitoring and evaluation scheme afterwards. So that's a way to have like a loop to have information after the project is being delivered. And as I mentioned, we see every first project as a demonstrative project. And the idea is to have an incremental learning process of each project. So for the first building of Panama may have been the most complex one, because we needed to even make some tests and have the supplier to achieve the level of compliance that we needed. But for sure, on the second project, everything would keep improving. So that's also a vision that we have to have that incremental constancy. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've covered the questions that I see in the chat. I also, Carl, nice to see you, and nice to see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Evan, and hello, everybody. I've got a question, I think directed to Beatrice. So regarding the, sorry, I forgot to properly introduce myself. So I'm Carl Peet. I work with Conservation Biology Institute, and the initiative you see in this logo on my screen, the Global Wildfire Collective, as an initiative of that. But I've also worked for the past 20 years, 20 plus, in sustainable transport. And so more recently have come to the biodiversity side, and I'm really seeing some opportunities, as we've discussed in recent conversations with many in this group, seeing opportunities to kind of heighten the discussion on biodiversity and nature within the global transport community and kind of in the transport track in global processes. And so the question I have is, as I said, for Beatrice, regarding the mitigation hierarchy. So the avoid, minimize, restore, offset hierarchy. And I'm very intrigued, coming from the transport sector. It's quite reminiscent of another framework in the transport sector, the avoid, shift, improve framework. Don't know if you're aware of this. I'm seeing from the reaction on your face, but this is more applicable to transport behavior. So kind of what we do as we move through the world, the hierarchy is first to avoid unnecessary trips, second to shift to more energy efficient trips, public transport, active transport, that type of thing. And then improve is kind of, again, a last resort, which is to change technologies, use electric versus internal combustion vehicles, etc. But I mentioned that because in recent months and years, I've had conversations with colleagues in Colombia and Egypt of sort of transposing this transport behavior centered hierarchy to a more infrastructure and nature positive hierarchy, which is more avoiding, shifting, and improving the built environments, from a transport perspective. And so, yeah, so I guess to a lot of background here, but it's, kind of an involved conversation. But I guess my particular questions would be, Yeah. Do you also see, I was looking at the partners from your slide, and there's a lot of focus on supply chain, but I guess what I'm interested in knowing is, sort of who are you working with in the transport sector? What opportunities do you see to kind of bring this mitigation hierarchy from a project scale to a program or a framework scale? And really, how can I contribute and facilitate that conversation?
Okay. Thanks, Carl, for the question. Right. So in terms of transportation projects, we have different types of transportation project that we have self-assessed that I can think of. We have a railway in Czech Republic. We have a vessel, maritime transport with the ports in Lake Victoria, between Uganda and Tanzania. We have a metro line in Brazil, and all of these projects are actually able to claim what we call the positive contribution towards resilience because of the transport mode shift. So the second step of your hierarchy, because they say that of course, they avoid traffic on the road, and therefore they avoid accidents on the road. So that's good for society. At the same time, they also avoid emissions, right? And then we have some electric vehicles project being labeled in Hong Kong. What perhaps something that we, with regards to transport system, actually an interesting conversation that I've been having also with some colleagues here. I think Tremaine was involved and Kate. Is about how we assess biodiversity impacts of moving assets, really with relation to transport. So we are a bit stuck there. So after the conversation that we had, we're a bit stuck because stakeholder or different project developers come to us and say, but I would actually like to label my fleet of buses or my fleet of I don't know, vessels. But when the route is kind of limited, like within Lake Victoria, the biodiversity impacts are it's still doable, but we don't know how to do with like an asset that we don't know where it's gonna go. So at that point, we as the Fast Infallible, or more broadly, as the biodiversity community, we don't know how to assess the biodiversity of that system. So that could be like, I mean, this is a problem that we have. We are stuck with that. If you have ideas on that, happy to hear from you. And perhaps, sorry, I don't feel I answer your question. I just added more comments, more challenges.
Yeah, that's great. Always a question should beget another question, so that's, I think, positive. But yeah, again, a conversation to continue. Also, in of course the larger context of the grid project being kicked off recently by WWF and many other partners, but also, yeah, just maybe a final point on what I'd mentioned earlier about that avoid, shift, improve hierarchy, and sort of, I think, general focus from the transport community is it's in my perception and in my experience working within that community, it's much more human-centered and human-centered impacts. And of course, that's critically important. But again, just wanted to sort of mention, it sounds like there's perhaps an opportunity from kind of from both sides, from the transport side and also from the nature side. And that's the conversation that is really starting to ramp up. But I think where you sit is really playing a critical role, kind of in the infrastructure side and the yeah, what you're doing with Fast Infra is a critical link. So just would like to continue the conversation and of course make some space for others to jump in. So
Yeah,
thank you. Appreciate
thank
the question and the
you.
presentation.
Thanks, Carl, for a great question, Beatrice. it's actually a perfect way to sort of close this out because it sounds like a topic for another webinar hosted by CoPNI, a sub-community of practice that perhaps needs to be developed under the umbrella of CoPNI to focus on some of these specific issues. And that's what I'd love to leave this group with, just for a few housekeeping reminders. But first, a huge thanks to Beatrice, Santiago, and Mauricio for a really interesting set of presentations. I think stimulating some cool, interesting, and frankly non-conventional dialogue between actors. And that really, again, as I said at the outset, is the hope and goal and purpose of the community of practice. A community of practice is meant to bring together practitioners to unearth some of these issues and have some of these interesting conversations. So I hope future CoPNI organized dialogues will be as interesting and stimulating. If you haven't already joined or registered your interest for joining the community of practice on nature and infrastructure, you can do so via the link that's at the very top of the chat, which will take you to the Greening Transportation Infrastructure Development Jeff-funded program that I referenced. You can there's an email in there that you can use to note your interest in participating. As I said, this is a very loose sort of bottom-up approach to developing community amongst practitioners and stakeholders. And to that end, if you have a suggestion or suggestions for future dialogues, webinars, conversations in that link, please feel free to add them, and we can facilitate, organize, and put those dialogues together, or simply create a bilateral exchange between a handful of people who may be interested in a similar topic and have already registered. So I look forward to future webinars and conversations. I look forward to comments about this particular dialogue and expressions of interest for future conversations, and wanted to thank once more our presenters for joining today and all of our participants for joining today as well. We're right at the top of the hour, so we're going to close. Final note, this is being recorded. As we said at the outset, feel free to download and watch and access any of the resources that were referenced during the chat as well. So thank you all very much. I hope you have a great day and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.